Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to, Lambda School's free mini bootcamp course. In this course, we're going to be talking about, this is going to be lesson 9 today. And so we're going to be talking about some more advanced JavaScript topics. I just kind of want to give you a rundown for those of you that might be new. If you are new, feel free to hang out with us tonight, watch the video, and then go back, and we have all of our lessons from the last 2 weeks are recorded on our YouTube channel. So feel free to go back and work through them at your own pace. And then there is a GitHub repo that kind of follows along with it, and some assignments for all the lessons. For those of you that have been here the entire time, this is our last week together. So these are going to be the last 4 lessons. The next couple of days, we're going to continue talking about JavaScript a little more in depth and get into some more pretty advanced topics. For those of you that are following along and are working on the assignments as we go, just keep in mind that these are advanced topics. We don't expect you to get any of this stuff the first time around and have a complete understanding of it, right? This is merely an introduction to these topics, and this is where we'd like you to be at when we finish this course. We'd like you to, once you have finished all the assignments, that's where we really want you to be when you start the full program at Lambda School, if you choose to go on from the free mini bootcamp here and join our full program. Our full program is a 6-month computer science immersive. So being 6 months, we go above and beyond what a normal boot camp kind of model would be, which is kind of just teaching you the basics of web development and kind of throwing you out the door. Here at Lambda School, we call our program the Academy of Computer Sciences because we go beyond what a boot camp is. And so the first half of our program, we do go over that web development stuff. We go, start with HTML and CSS and start talking about things like positioning and preprocessors using less, and CSS frameworks. And then we go into our JavaScript and get over the data structures and kind of more advanced CS topics as well. Go over React and Redux and some other front-end frameworks. And then we hop into teaching you how to be a full-stack web developer by going over Node.js and databases and DevOps and deploying to GCP and AWS. From that point, we then start our full computer science course where, we're talking about low-level computer science. We use C, Python. We go into computer architecture, and dig deep into algorithms as well. So this is a full program, and our job is to have you career ready by the time you finish this course, and to a level that an employer is really going to find beneficial to them and to yourself. You're not just going to be, this little quick 3-month, however long other boot camps take, out the door. You're going to really have been immersed in this stuff for 6 months. So we do have a full-time program starting every month, the first Monday of the month. As I've said, those of you that are looking to start March 5th, I hope you got an application in already and hopefully an interview set up with Karen or our admissions staff. I believe that we are maybe have 1 slot or might be full. If that is the case, please contact our admissions staff and apply as soon as possible. If we are full, there is a waiting list you can get on, but talk to them and we'll try everything we can to get you in and start on that date that you would like. If you want to start, next month or the month after, just start that application process now. We can get you in, and we can get talking to you and get you set on the right track to have you fully ready to start on your choice of your start date. So get those applications in, and like I always say, make sure that you tell them that you're in the mini bootcamp course, because we do give priority to the mini bootcamp students because it shows that you've taken initiative, you've taken your own time, you're working through this stuff, and we like to see that on all of our stuff. So, one last thing, our pricing model allows us to be really generous and allows us to offer the full-time course for no upfront charge. And it's not until you've graduated and you've gotten your first job that you start paying us back. So that gives, lets us take the risk on with you to create a student that is fully employable. Because if you don't get a job, then we don't get paid. So, it's like this win-win for both of us to get you ready and set and getting the job after the course is over. So that is our full-time Academy of Computer Science course. This free, absolutely 100% free 12-lesson mini bootcamp we get to provide to you for free. And this is just kind of an introduction to basic web development and kind of gives you a shot at getting some hands-on experience with some of the tools a web developer uses in their everyday job. And so, we talked about HTML and CSS. The first couple of lessons talked about Git and version control. We're deep diving into JavaScript right now. And then we're going to wrap it all up on Thursday with a lesson on DOM manipulation and get you to build an actual working web app. And that's, where we want to get you at the end of this 12-lesson course. So without further ado, let's start today's lesson. I'll share my screen. All right, so kind of go over a little bit of what we did last Thursday, and where we left off. Last week we talked about classes. For those of you that were here last week, we can have a kind of generic, we can build a generic object that takes, we're going to call it Dan, and we're going to say this is a Dan user object. Dan.trainer, who I am. We're going to say password, BC123. We'll just leave it at that for right now. I will put a loves JavaScript because it's true. Loves JavaScript. And we talked about, missing a comma, talked about how we want to create, hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of users. We don't want to have to go in and create this new object every single time, write it out. The keys, username, password, loves JavaScript, because they're going to be different for everyone. So we talked about using a class and being able to do that. And how we use a class is kind of write. We're not going to call it Dan because it's going to be all users. We write a function. We give it that uppercase, and we give it some arguments. So we give a name, PW, loves JavaScript. And then inside of it, we learned that the class does some automatic things for us. So it gives us a object, and referred to as this, and then we can add keys to the object, and then it returns that object for us automatically. Necessary, I guess. So that we can use the new keyword. So we let Dan equal new user. And we give it Dan.trainer. Oops, that's right. That's what we missed here. This is equal to our arguments. So give it our arguments. And now we can console log Dan and see that we have a Dan user, right? And then we can, as we saw before, we can create as many users as we want. User Maria. Let's give her the username Maria. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Password and true. And so then we can see that we can create as many of these classes, these constructor class, or these classes as we want. It'll create a new object for us. We also learned about the prototype that is on every single constructor, right? So we call this a constructor or class constructor, and it has access to a prototype object, which we can store methods on. And then we can say return and we talked more about the this keyword and how it is on whatever the object is that's calling it. Turn this dot username plus says hi. And now we can say Maria dot says hi. And we remember, got to use our parentheses to start the function. And now we can see Maria says hi. Great. So that's what we had talked about on Thursday. We're going to switch gears a little bit today, and we're going to talk about something called callbacks. And callbacks are essentially a function that we can pass as an argument to another function. It's a really important concept in JavaScript, and it's used all over the place in JavaScript. So we're going to talk about callbacks tonight. And then we're going to go over some more array methods. Arrays are super powerful data structure types, and they have a lot of really built-in powerful native methods to them that use callbacks essentially. So we're gonna kind of show you how to write a callback, and then we will use that concept in these array methods. So as I said before, callbacks are a really important concept in JavaScript, and it's the ability to pass a function as an argument to another function. That might sound a little crazy, and it does take a while to kind of wrap your head around how this is working and how it's happening. These functions can be called anytime within the other function, and they can be passed arguments as well. We'll soon discover why callbacks are so important to JavaScript when we talk about those array methods. And then I'll show you how to write them right now. So let's say we have a function called says hello to user. Okay. We give it a user to say hello to, and all it does is returns hello plus user plus exclamation point there. Really simple function right here. All it does is it says hello to the user, right? So we can say says hello to user Dan. And now we'll see hello Dan. You know, pretty simple. Let's see, we had another function called says goodbye to user. Use lowercase, and essentially does the same exact thing. And let's see, and goodbye, Dan. Okay, two pretty simple functions here. So now let's say we have this program that when a user logs in, it says hello to the user. And when a user logs out, it says goodbye to the user. Well, we can use the same function to do both. And we can call it something like create greeting. Okay. And in this greeting, what we want to do is if we'll have some other code somewhere that'll be create greeting, and if it is logging in, we'll pass in the username. So we'll give it user again, and then we'll pass in which function we want it to run. So we'll say if user logs in, essentially, we want to do one thing, else if they're logging out, we want to do another thing, right? So we call this a callback. We are allowed to pass these functions into other functions and then call the functions within that function. That's a bit of a word jumble right there, but let's see it in action. Convention in JavaScript is to either call this argument callback or CB. You can name it whatever you want, but just know that when we write code, And we name things, we aren't naming them for us. We're naming them for the developers we're working with. We're naming them for future us. If you write this function and you have to revisit it 2 months from now, you really want to be able to just instantly recognize that, oh, that's a callback. I see exactly what that is. So that's why we use these kind of naming conventions. It's not set in stone, and wherever you end up working as your job, developer job, they're going to have their own kind of, oh, we name our callbacks callback, or we name our callback CB. But just for now, we're going to use CB just as the name of the callback. So inside of it, we want to return CB. And remember, this is always going to be a function. If we see CB, we know that it's a function. And how do we get functions to run? We give it parentheses, and in this case, we're going to pass in the user to the callback. Okay, so let's actually, I'm going to go over this a little bit more. So instead of this, we're going to create greeting. We're going to give it the user of Dan. And now we can pass it either says hello to user or says goodbye to user. So let's, for the moment, do this. I want a console log says hello to user. And right, so I'm not putting those parentheses on the end that says hello to user. I just want to see what it is. So now we see that when we console log it, it's just a function. And if we had a little bit more verbose console here, it would give us the entire function readout. But we know that it's a function. So we can pass this says hello to user around like any other variable. It's essentially a variable. And instead of pointing to a string or a number or a Boolean, it's pointing to a function. And we can then pass it around. Just like, if we had const name equals Dan, we can say name. We can pass name into the says hello to user as our user, right? Just like we're passing name in as a variable that points to a string, we can also pass in functions as variables that point to functions. Okay, so in this case, let's just do, we give it Dan, and actually we can just give it name right here. Oh, that's a little too confusing for the moment. Let's go, and let's give it the says hello to user variable, right? Now we can console log CB inside of the create greeting, right? Now we see the same exact thing, right? The function says hello to user is inside of there now. All we're doing, remember, is just passing this into that function as an argument, as a variable, essentially. So now that we have this callback available to us inside of this function, now let's do something like return CB. We know that it's a function, so let's give it those parentheses now because we want to call it now, and we'll give it a user. So we should get hello Dan, because we've passed in the says hello to user. We've called that callback inside of this function, and we've given it the user. So I just want to make sure that's clear of why we're not doing that, why we're able to pass this function into another function, why this is not called says hello to user, because as we're going to see in a moment, this can be any function we want it to be, as long as it takes one argument that's a user. It can be any function we want. Create greeting doesn't know that this function says hello to user. Create greeting doesn't care that that function CB says hello to user. All it knows is that it's a function and that we can call it, right? Just want to kind of go over that and a little bit more. Just once again, we can pass this function, this entire function. This is the variable name. We can pass that into another function and then assign it its own name inside of that function, and then we can call it. And this is called a callback, and this is called a higher order function. It's using other functions to do its work for it. And so this allows us to, let's go console log that, and then we can console log the create greeting again. Let's actually just do this. Create greeting and give it Dan. And now instead it says hello to user, let's say it says goodbye to user. So now we're passing in an entirely different function. It says goodbye to user, but it doesn't matter because it's going to be given that CB name, right? And it's going to be called, and we're going to pass the user into it. And now we'll see goodbye, Dan, being printed off. And now we can run it, you know, multiple times with hello, Dan, and goodbye, Dan. This is a very basic use. And you might be thinking, well, why instead of create greeting, why don't you just says hello to user? We could do that. But as we're going to see in just a moment, this is kind of just a quick example of how we can use callback functions. But, you know, just kind of want to go over this a little bit more. Once again, says hello to user and says goodbye to user are functions. But the says hello to user is a variable name as well. It's the name of the function. It's a variable name. And just like any other variable, we can pass it around. We can put it in arguments in a function. You know, if we still have that const name equals Dan, we can put name here. You know, we can pass any variable we want into functions. And we can pass variables around as we please. See, we still get the same thing because name equals Dan, console log name, console log says hello to user. Essentially, it's going to do the same exact thing. It's going to tell us what it is, and we're allowed to pass those around. See, we have Dan, and this says hello to user function. That's an important distinguishment in using these callbacks. It's important to understand that this is just, the name of this is just a variable. Says hello to user is just a variable that points to a function, just as name is just a variable name that points to a string. And we can use those interchangeably as we want. We have given it the name of CB. As I said before, we can give this any name we want. We can call it reading function if we wanted to, or reading callback, which might be a little more telling of what it is. And it doesn't matter, right? Still the same thing. And we can call it inside of our other function. Remember, when we do call a function, we have to give it those parentheses. Remember, that's like our key to our car right there, are those parentheses. So keep it in mind, we use those parentheses on there. So now that we know what a callback function is and how to use a callback function, let's start playing around with some array methods that utilize callback functions. So let's give ourselves an array. We're going to call it cars. Actually, I'm just going to copy this from my notes. Because we got a little bit of stuff to go over right here. All right, these are the names of our cars. And we just have a cars array with the names of different brands of cars in it. Pretty simple. So if we remember back to our days of writing for loops, which was last week on arrays, let's say we wanted to print each name of the car to the screen. We can say for I equal 0, I less than cars.length, I plus plus. And then we can say console log cars. Right? Pretty simple. And now we see Ford, Chevrolet, Toyota, Tesla, the names of the cars printed to the screen. Now let's say we wanted to give it a function and function, let's call it name cars. Cars names, print cars. And it took a car, a single car, an item or a car. And all I did was console log, let's say car, and we'll say plus is a car brand. So we wanted to do, we were going to print the name of the car that we give it. We'll say is a car brand. So then, kind of, let's look at this a little bit. And so we can say print car. We'll call it car because cars refers if there's multiple, and all it knows about is one. And we'll say this is Ford. And we'll see Ford. Let's put a space in there. Ford is a car brand. Okay. We can also put cars 0, right? Because we're using our numerical index, and we see that Ford is at the first item in the cars, and we know that 0 is the first item, and we should see same exact thing. We can go 1. Chevrolet is a car brand. Now, instead of just printing the name of the car itself, let's go in here and pass this function in. Okay, so now we have this function, we have a loop that's happening, and every time this loop runs, this I will change. It's going to pass a new car into the print car function. It's going to run it, and it's going to keep going until there are no more cars left in the array. And we should see Ford is a car brand, Chevrolet is a car brand, Tesla, Toyota, Tesla, etc. Great, so now we have introduced kind of almost a callback function in here. So if we don't want to write this entire thing out, we can give an array. Array has a method called for each. So cars.for each, and the only item it takes is the callback function. So in this case, our callback function is going to be print car. And we'll see what happens. There we go. Ford is a car brand, Chevrolet is a car brand. Let's put a little exclamation point so that we know we've changed something. And now we see for each, what it's doing is it is writing your loop for you. And it's just putting the callback there. That's all it's doing. It's taking your array, it's writing a loop, and it's putting each item into that callback that we've given it, which in this case is print car, every time. And it's doing that for each item in the array, and then it's finished. Oops. So that's for each. And we can see that our callback is print car. It's taking a single item, and it's being called, and it's console logging that every single time for each item in the array. So that's for each. For each loops over each item in the array, and it calls a callback and passes that item into the item on the array. So for each is pretty simple. It's essentially just a quick way to write an easy for loop using a callback. That's all it's doing, right? Let's talk about another array method. This one's called map. So let's kind of take that off. We'll leave that. We'll actually return that instead of console logging it. So now instead of it just being called, what map does is it creates a new array. It calls it runs a for loop, and each time it runs the callback, it says new array dot push. Whatever this function, whatever the callback returns, it's going to, let's actually just type this out, print car. It's going to change the item in that array and put it in the new array. And then it's going to give us back that new array. So let's go console log new R. So what we're doing is we're changing every item in the array. We're not actually changing it. We're creating a new copy of it and putting it in a new array. And now we can see Ford is a car brand, Chevrolet is a car brand, Toyota is a car brand, Tesla is a car brand. Okay. So with map, just know that it's going to always create a new array, and it's always going to give you that new array back. Okay. So we can see const new R equals cars.map, and we give it our callback function, which is print car. Print car, as we see, is going to return the name of the car and then return it, add the string on it is a car brand. Map is going to loop through this array, and it's going to say Ford, and it's going to say is a car brand. Put that in the new array. Chevrolet is a car brand. Put that in the new array. Toyota, Tesla, put all those in the new array, and it's going to give us back a new array. Okay, and we can see it's pretty much the same thing. Now I want to show you something kind of cool about map, is that it doesn't affect the original array at all. We can see the original array is still there with Ford, Chevrolet, Toyota, and Tesla. I want to write this out for you. Let's call this, let's go map, put an array, callback, and we're going to say and we're going to do return new array. Oops. Instead of print car, we don't know what kind it is. We don't know what the name of the, we just know it's a callback. So now we can see here exactly what map is doing. We'll just do this. So this is what map is doing. It's creating a new array. It's running a for loop. And actually, I'm going to let this, we'll go what on this mapped item equals and now we're going to push mapped item. We can kind of get a better idea of what's happening, right? The callback is going to return something. It always has to return something. And in this case, it's going to return the name of the car plus is a car brand. And that's going to be equal to mapped item. We're going to push that into the new array. When it's all said and done, we're going to return the new array. This is what map is doing. Oops. 7. We need to call it a function first. All right. Now we can see that it has returned that new array with those items changed in it. It is a, we'll say, great car brand, you know, anything. Great car. And it's going to change it however we want to change it. That is map. And so just remember that when we do write something like cars.map, this is what it's doing. It's creating a new array. It's running a for loop. It's running each item in that function, and it's returning that item and pushing it into the new array and then giving us a new array back. I want to show you another way to write this. We can write this whole thing inside of those parentheses if we want. We just use the function. that. So we give it what we call an anonymous function, which doesn't have a name. And usually we're going to give this something called an item. We know it's going to be a car in this case. And so that does the same exact thing, right? This is the one argument right here. This is the whole argument. And we'll see it does the same exact thing. Or we'll just say is a car, right? So that's called an inline. We're writing that function inline, and it's an anonymous function, and we're passing it directly into. Just know that for each and map are going to take at least one argument. Their callback functions are going to take at least one argument, and that is going to be the item from the array. I've saved probably the toughest callback function array method for last. And this is something that takes a lot of practice to use and to work with. This is called reduce. And actually, I'm not going to give it cards, or we're just going to give it some numbers. Nums. Okay, so reduce essentially is going to run a loop on our array, passing each item into a callback function, right? And with the intention that when reduce is done running, when that for loop is done, it is going to give us back one item. It's really kind of simple to show you with numbers here, because we can do something like, what if we wanted to add all of these numbers up? I'm going to add them all up and see what the sum of all the numbers was, right? So in this case, let's write it out without using reduce. We can say let sum equal 0. We're going to give it a for loop. Let I equal 0, I less than nums dot length, I plus plus. And then we can say sum equals sum plus nums I. And we can return, or we'll just console log it since we're not in a function, sum. All right, so there we go, 15. All right, so we've written a for loop. We've returned something from that for loop, and then we've returned it all at the end. And so let's write we're just going to call it sum, and we're going to give it the current sum, and we're going to give it the number. And what we're going to do is we're going to return current sum plus number. Okay. So now we can do this. Sum equals, oops, we got two sums on there. Sum func equals sum func, give it sum, and then we give it nums I. So we see that what this is doing now is it is going to run this for loop, and it's going to reassign that sum variable. And we see we have a single equal sign, so that's an assignment. And it's going to reassign it every single time it runs this loop with whatever this returns, right? We don't know or care what it returns. You know, if we're using it, we know what it is, but the for loop doesn't know or care what it returns, and it's going to just return something. And now we can see we'll add another number onto it. It should be 21 now. See how that happens. So let's go through this step by step. First, the sum is equal to 0. The index is 0. We got nums.length. Well, here's our nums right up here. So now we're going to say the sum no longer equals 0, but whatever this function with these arguments passed into it does. Let's look into this function. We've put the sum in here, which this first time is 0. Nums I, which nums of 0 is 1. So now we have current sum is 0, number is 1. 0 plus 1 equals 1. So now sum is equal to 1. Loops again. Same thing. Now we have sum function takes 1 as its first argument and takes 2 as its second argument. Comes in here, 1 plus 2 equals 3, so now sum equals 3. And actually we can log sum the entire way through it and see it. It keeps going through. So now sum is 3, and we're adding 3 to it. Now sum is 6, and we're adding 4 to it. Now sum is 10, and we're adding 5 to it. And it keeps going until it runs out of numbers, and we're at 21. And we can see 0, 1, 3, 6, 10, 15, 21. Each time it runs through that for loop, it adds a new number to it. This is, in essence, what reduce is doing. Let's write reduce. So we are going to say const sum equals nums.reduce. And reduce is going to take at least one argument, and that's going to be the reducer, what we call a reducer. And it's going to take an optional second argument, which is going to be where we want it to start from. If we don't give it the second argument, it's always going to start from the first item in the array. So we can give it sum func. And then see what we get. Should get 21 still. 21. So let's talk about the callback for reduce is a little bit different than the callback for map and each and for each, because map and for each always just give it that item, right? So that's the number, that's the item that is always passed to map and for each. Let's write it right directly in here. This tends to be a little bit more. Reduce, the callback in reduce is always going to take 2 arguments. The first argument is what we call the accumulator, and the second argument is going to be the item. So it's going to keep that, remember that running total of sum, that's going to be the accumulator, right? So it's going to be the new updated total every single time it loops. And the item is just going to be the item in the array. And now we can say return accumulator plus item. We should get the same exact 21. Let's add 7 to it so we can see it different. 28, right? So each time it's run, that accumulator is updated from the last time it's run. Reduce keeps a memory of what it was last time, just as like we had sum here, right? And then it equals the newest version of that. And it loops through each item until you get to the final one. So this is reduce. This is a tough idea and tough concept, and something that's really takes a lot of work and a lot of practice for writing it and using it a lot in order to get it down. I want to show you that what we would do if we gave it a starting point. So let's say we wanted to see how far away from 100, how many less than 100 all the items equal to. So the first time through, if we give it that second argument right there, the first time through, the accumulator is going to equal that starting point. So sometimes you might see this called starting point. Sometimes you see it called accumulator. I like to call it an accumulator because it's only the starting point once. And then it's going to return over and over and over again. Let's go minus the item. So now it's going to take 100, and it's going to subtract 1 from it. So now accumulator is going to be 99. So it's going to subtract 2, 97, subtract 3, 94, 90, 85, 79, 72. Should get 72 from it, right? So accumulator, the reduce is not always adding things to it. It's, we can do anything we want. And reduce is an ultra powerful callback method Reduce is so powerful that most data science and things like that are run on map and reduce. Like those are the two functions. You map all your items and then you reduce them down to one thing. You get this readout from what it is. You will see reduce is used in so many more ways than just getting the sum of all the numbers in an array. In one case, let's look at reduce with a string real quick, and it'll be our last item tonight. So let's say we have a string and we just have the words hi, the string's hi, my name is Dan, whatever. 5 strings in an array. All right, by themselves, they don't do anything. Let's remove that or remove that. No, I want to keep that on there. So let's say we want to reduce this down to one string with all those reduced down to one string. So we can say accumulator item, and we can just say plus. Say plus. We'll give it a space in there. Plus item. So at first, our first time it runs, high is going to be the accumulator, and then each item will come after it. So it'll be high plus a space plus my. Then the accumulator will be high plus space plus my, and we'll say plus name. Or then we're going to say hi, my name plus is. Space is. So hi, my name is plus Dan. And we'll see the one string readout there of hi, my name is Dan. Like I said, reduce is an incredibly powerful method, and we can do so much with it. Right now, we're going to have you, write it out as much as possible and use those callback functions to get all of those items added up or created into one string, etc. Because we just want you to practice writing the function. Much farther down the road, especially when you get into the full program, you're going to see reduce used in all kinds of ways, map and reduce. One thing to remember is I always say, remember that reduce is the callback is always going to take 2 items. The accumulator always comes first. The item always comes second. And so that is reduce, map, and each. And those are using callback functions on them. That being said, that's it for tonight's lesson. Not a whole lot of new concepts, but concepts that are very advanced, difficult to grasp, and we want you to spend a lot of time practicing them. That being said, I'm going to open it up to the questions channel. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask on the questions channel, and I will get them read out and hopefully answered for you. That being said, also, if you are going to start on the assignment tonight, the lesson 9 channel, or whichever lesson you're currently on, that's the lesson channel you should go to seek for help. We also have a general help channel, but you tend to get a little bit more pointed advice in the lesson channels themselves. So let's see. I have a question, what this keyword does inside of a function. That's a pretty advanced topic, and it's a topic that we cover in depth inside of our full course. It's a little advanced and a little out of the scope of our lessons right now. But just know that when we're using it in an object or a class, this refers to whatever the object is to the left of the dot, right? So if in that case before we had Dan dot says hi. If somewhere in says hi function, it calls this dot username or this. We can always see the dot, and whatever object is to the left of the dot, that is the object that this refers to. But it gets a lot deeper than that, and we go much more in depth in it in our full course. Give you guys a couple more minutes to ask some questions in the questions channel. Yeah, so I see a question on here or a statement from Eric that says, saw the message about no classes, didn't realize it applied to the mini boot camp. Yeah, so since we are on this pretty set, rigid schedule, we're doing the mini boot camp tonight. Obviously, if you're here, you're watching it. And you might be watching it in the future. Just know that if you do miss one of these classes, we record everything, and it's available directly after the class ends on YouTube. So, say you got, something going on tomorrow night and you can't get to the lesson 10, just, whenever you get home or before we start the next lesson, go back and rewatch it. We record all of these lessons and they're available always directly after we get done with the lesson itself, recorded on YouTube. Yeah, so someone said that I mentioned that we should not use for in loops on arrays. No, don't use for in loops on arrays. For in loops should only be used for objects. And actually, there's some newer ES6 syntax that we will be using. And for in loops really shouldn't be used at all in production code anymore. But we go deeper into that. We introduce for in loops just as a way of getting you to think about loops and think about objects. But there's a couple different ways to use them. Just make sure that whatever you do, you don't use them on arrays. All right, everybody, that's going to cover it for tonight. Thanks for joining me once again for lesson 9 of Lambda School's free mini bootcamp course. Join me again tomorrow night for lesson 10. And we're going to go over some more advanced JavaScript. We've got a couple more JavaScript lessons. And then tomorrow night's a pretty advanced topic, closure. But thanks again for joining me tonight. And if you're watching this recorded, thanks for watching. And we'll see you guys tomorrow night at 5 p.m. Pacific for lesson 10. Have a good night, everybody.